more time, we'll be ready to go. All right.
All right, Homer, we're gonna start with an easy one. Give me your name and spell it.
Homer Ryan, Homerryan.
So you grew up here in Frederick.
Correct.
How was life like growing up here?
Great. It really was. I've always, all my life, been the mad dash for cash. But I've always said, if someone come in and said, I'll give you $20 million, but we're gonna take your memory from age 22 back and erase it, I wouldn't swap with them, because Frederick's a great place to grow up. A lot of good memories.
Yeah. And how old were you in the 56 team?
I was in sixth grade.
Great. Did you fall with
Oh,
those guys
yeah.
your idols?
You bet. You bet.
Yeah. So
Ouija was my star idol until he gained that weight.
all right. So what year did you graduate high school?
1963.
So the school still had not integrated at that point.
When I was a senior, there were two black girls that were sophomores that came over that year, you know. And I think it was mainly because they didn't have the sciences offered at Board High School at that time.
But no football players or basketball or track at that time.
No, we all played football all the way through. Not
But-
basketball, because Board High was still going at that time.
Mm-hmm. So let me go back to when you were young, in sixth grade. Did all your friends, do you remember, were you wearing like Frederick Red colors, going to games and?
No, I don't think that was really a trend back then. You just, a lot of Sandlot football type deal. Kids just played sports all the time. It's clean fun, but, and all, and you enjoyed being around the Frederick Bomber, you know.
So when did you get to know Coach Wild? When you were starting?
Whenever I got to junior high, I guess, and started playing football, and then whenever I came over as a freshman at the end of the season, well, they'd select 2 or 3 from football and 2 or 3 from basketball. They would go over and go to the last game or 2 with the football and basketball teams when you were a freshman in high school.
Mm-hmm. So Coach Wild, what kind of person was he?
Coach Tough is a junkyard dog. He was an exceptionally tough individual. But if Dean Wild liked you, he liked you. And I think one of the biggest things that Coach did, he was always for the poor or the down-thrown type of person, you know, that they just want to do something a little better in life. And he'd give you the opportunity if you wanted to fight and strive for something. Dean Wild was the type of guy to let you do it.
Let's start earlier. Can we, let's get something to put this paper on? No, let's pull a chair up, just because we don't want to hear the wrangling.
Oh, sure. Sorry.
Yeah, well, you're not gonna see that, so.
Thank you.
Let's go back. So Darrell Royal,
Yes.
tell me the relationship between Darrell and Coach Wild.
Okay. Dean Wild was an assistant at Hollis, Oklahoma. And he just really built up a friendship with Darrell Royal when he was growing up.
What year was this? Do you remember?
This would have probably been in the early 40s. And I think when Darrell Royal's family moved to California, I believe Coach told me that was in when he was a sophomore in high school. And he said, I could see that I thought he was going to be a great athlete. And he said, I wrote him a letter and told him if he wanted to come back to Hollis to play football, that he could live with him. And Darrell Royal hitchhiked from California back to Hollis, Oklahoma, and lived with Dean and Mildred Wild his sophomore year, and played, and then, of course, went on to glory at the University of Oklahoma. But Darrell Royal always thought that Dean Wild was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And when I was in high school, Darrell Royal was the coach at the University of Texas, and every year he would make 1 to 2 trips to come by Frederick on his way to Hollis to go home, and he would always come visit with Dean. Thought the world of him. Not only that, he also knew what Dean Wild was as a coach. And back in those days, well, the freshmen weren't with the varsity. You had freshmen and you had varsity, sophomore, junior, senior. And he had a standing offer of Dean Wild. And every time he'd come, well, I'd see Darrell Royal at all in coach's office, and he'd say, well, Coach, he said that offer's still standing. And I asked Coach one day, I said, what's he talking about? And he said, oh, he wants me to be the freshman football coach at the University of Texas, and always offers it to me every year when he comes up. But it's just a nice relationship.
It's an amazing relationship. I've heard just from my family, how big Coach Royal means to Texas and Oklahoma.
Oh, yeah. But, when I was in high school, Coach Wild's mom passed away, and I'll never forget at halftime, I think we were playing Altus, and at halftime, well, he read a telegram from Darrell Royal stating how he sorry for his loss and everything. But, Dean was an unusual individual. I think when he left Hollis, he went to Watonga, Oklahoma. And at Watonga, he won a state championship in football. That would have been the late 40s, maybe 48 or so. He comes to Frederick and wins state championship here in '56. And for a number of years, Coach Wild had the distinction of being the only coach in the state of Oklahoma that won 2 state championships in 2 different towns, 2 separate towns. And I'm sure, that's happened a lot since then, but that was quite a distinction back.
Let's go back to that first state championship.
Yes.
He got let go of his job. Is that correct? Like he was too brash?
I think so.
Yeah. Just, you think he was too much for the administration there, or too hard on the students?
I don't think it would be that. I'd say that probably is just an administration clash. Because Coach, I never saw him be hard on students. I mean, he'd make you work and all that, but as far as really being mean to someone or something, I couldn't see that in him.
Did he ever, was there much punishment? Like if a player missed a block or screwed up a play, was there
Oh,
any?
yeah. Yeah, he would get on you pretty good. And
What would he do?
I don't know, he'd probably make you run extra laps. He didn't like guys overweight, I can tell you that, because, of course, back in those days, you're small and skinny anyway. But I can remember we had one guy that was larger on the team, and coach is going to make him smaller, and so he run extra laps, around this practice field track out here. And
When if you miss a block during a game or fumble, I mean, would he grab your helmet, grab your face mask, or
No.
would he doing that type of stuff?
No, I never saw, where grabbing a face mask or anything. I never really remember that. I can remember one time he had taken us to Oklahoma City to a all-college basketball tournament. We were coming back, and I said, Coach, were you a good football player in college? He said, good. He said, as a junior before they give me a helmet. So, but he would state his mind, But as far as physically grabbing somebody, I don't ever remember that as such, really.
Just trying to get a feel for him as a person.
Sure.
as well. By the time you were there, I mean, by the time you were in high school, was racial tension still pretty high? Or just, I mean,
No, I
some
don't
of the
think
older-
so. We had a good team back then. We were preseason picked to win Class A in the state of Oklahoma that year, when I was a junior. And we had 4 guys that started that were black guys and all, and I wouldn't say that there was any problem whatsoever.
When do you think, you know, because we've heard, well, all through America, you know, you had the colored water fountain and then the white color.
Yes.
When did that kind of, do you remember, were you in high school? Was it later? Was it?
You know, it must have been a little later, I'd say late 60s, early 70s, but I can remember in the courthouse where they had colored water fountains and whites and all on the water fountains. Coach, a lot of that kind of stuff was not that important to him, and I can tell you a funny incident of when they dedicated practice field out here. Frederick had a state championship in '93, 4, 5, and 6. And they'd asked Coach, because he was on the 56 head coach, would come down and speak. And he come down and they'd ask all those players from those teams to be there. And I'll never forget, Lloyd Logan was on one of the front rows, and he's talking, and he said, well, I went over and said I was responsible for integrating the Frederick sports program. I go over to Boyd High. I heard they had some fast colored boys over there, and he said I went over, got them, and he said something to the effect like, well, they were colored then, and I think they're black now, or Afro-American. And I'll never forget, he looked at Lloyd and he said, what do y'all like to be called now, Logan? He was just that type of individual, you know.
So you became friends after high school?
Great friends when I was growing up in high school, and then after high school, closer friends, yes, sir. I was the type of old kid, I was plenty poor growing up, and I'll never forget when I was a senior, he called me in, he said, well, I got you a scholarship at Cameron and Southeastern and Southwestern. And I said, man, I appreciate that, Coach. And he said, I'd probably go to Southwestern. He said, that's where I went to school. You know, but he just, he'd do anything he could to help you. But he would say about anything. I don't want to get off subject. I can give you a funny deal. One time we were playing basketball over at Tipton, Oklahoma, and Coach kept eking out on the court because he was a coach per se. He coached football, he coached basketball, he coached track, and he was creeping out on the court, and the official told him, said, you need to get back off court, Coach. And he kept creeping out, so the official called a technical on him. And he said, what do you want me to do? He said, I want you to get off of the court. And he called us off of the court and had us stand up in chairs on the sideline, and then he stood up in a chair, and he asked the official, said, is this what you want? And the official said, yes, it is, and give him another technical. So he was, we played Elk City in football, and there was a guy that was lineman of the year. His name was, he played for Oklahoma State and for the Houston Oilers, I can't think. But anyway, this guy was a star athlete, and he had tape around his wrist and around his ankles and everything, and kicked off, punted for Elk City also. Well, we had a play where our fullback, and our fullback was like 6 foot, 245, which is a pretty good sized boy in high school. And Roosevelt just come up as a blocking back, and little pass pay. This guy comes barreling through and knocks this guy down. I don't know if this fullback ever been knocked down. I mean, he just like fire plug. And so he comes back to huddle and he asked the quarterback, said, Goodner, would you call that play again? Never said a word in the huddle, so he did. And whenever this All-State All-American come through, Roosevelt grabbed him, picked him up, fell on him, and knocked him out. And so they called us over the sideline, and they're fanning this kid and everything, trying to revive him out there. And I'll never forget, old coach just turned and was in a huddle there, all the players. And he turned and he looked out there and he said, put some more tape on him, he'll be all right, and yelled it out. And I thought, yeah. he was pretty comical. Pretty comical type of guy.
But he had a deep voice that traveled far, I hear.
He did. And he wasn't that tall. And he was a great athlete himself, I guess, as far as his athleticism. I remember there was a kid that was about 6'5" and weighed 235 that was on our team. And he and Coach kind of clashed their personalities. And I'll never forget one day out in practice, Dean told him, said, I know you'd like to rip my head off. And he said, I'm going to give you this opportunity. And Coach is in coaching shorts and a T-shirt. And he said, I want you to get in and just come out and tear me up as rough as you can. And this old kid, whenever they hiked the ball, he goes out and Coach jumped straight up in the air and went over him. And he's trying to show, don't lose your head. You know, if you want to take care of somebody, you take care of them, but you do it sensibly. You don't do it stupidly and all. And trying to get a point across to that kid that, you know, he needs to control his temper more. You know,
so the kid was in full uniform?
Kid was in full uniform.
And he just jumped straight up?
He jumped straight up. Kid went under him, and Dean landed behind him.
Wow.
So I thought that amazed me at the time, as far as his athleticism.
Let's talk more about those practices. Tackling dummies and stuff, was Coach behind those tackling dummies, or how did that work? Do you remember?
Oh, yeah, and then we had a sled. I remember we had a two-man sled, and he'd be on the sled, and I can remember one time there was a guy got injured. He didn't like somebody tried to fake injury, I guess. He wanted you not to give 100. He wanted you to give the 100 plus, you know. And Bob Collins was the assistant coach whenever I was in high school. And a guy got his leg broke in practice. The second team was scrimmaging the first, and they were on defense, and we had a play, and anyway, this guy's leg wound up and it's broken. There's a compound fracture of the bone sticking out. And Coach couldn't see it or anything, but Collins, his assistant, he yells over and says, Coach, we've got a man down over here. And he said, we'll drag him over to the side and hang a lantern on him. Said, we'll pick him up as we go in tonight. You know, and Coach wasn't saying it disrespectful. That's just way, you know, okay, if you're injured, get over to the side and let's go on with practice, you know. But
any final thoughts on Coach Wild?
No, I think
All right, 1 second.
main thing.
Hold on 1 second.
Yeah. Have they told you this deal about before the Frederick Lawton game? They won the state championship that year.
No. Hold that thought.
That's a funny story, I think.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I think that's like jumping over the guys. Pretty
And this
amazing.
is a true deal. I mean, he's just very.
You know, these kids are 16, 17, 18. He's 40s. Man.
chairs in the room quick. All right.
Is Dean buried here?
No, it's Oklahoma City.
Okay. Some more time here.
I had a real good friend that in high school, he was John Goodner. John was a high school All-State All-American and made a college coach. Coached for, was defensive coordinator for Grant Taft at Baylor for 13 years. Spike Dykes at Texas Tech.
Wow.
Hal Mummy at Kentucky.
I know Hal.
And anyway, whenever John retired and come back to Frederick to live for a year, and he got a brain tumor. His diagnosis was what they call glioblastoma. And I know that John was a very prideful type guy, and Dean thought of John like a son, and all, and he just didn't want Coach to know that he was, sick or anything, because he'd always been such a specimen, such a good athlete, But Dean Wild called me religiously every week to check, see how Johnny was, until he passed away. Now,
Says a lot about
that's
him.
pretty loyal.
Yeah, absolutely. Pretty right. Pretty good. Tell us a story about the Lawton game.
Okay, supposedly, the season that they had the state championship team, Bob Bodenheimer was Lawton High School coach. I think Earl Presley was the Duncan coach. And Frederick went to Duncan, scrimmaged them, beat them like 7 or 8 touchdowns. And they really were able to see the explosiveness that they had in the backfield. And so Bob Bodenheimer, the Lawton coach, he tells his story to Dean later that he asked Earl Presley, the Duncan coach, said, they tell me Frederick's got a couple black boys that are pretty fast. Said, how would you play them defensively? Earl Presley told him, said, I'd get a Winchester and get up in the press box. Whenever they snapped the ball, I'd lead them. And when I say lead them, you need to lead them. I always thought that was a pretty neat story.
That's a great story. All right. Wow. Man, that's something. Any final thoughts on Coach Wild? Or your experience with him, or?
I just, I think Dean Wild was probably one of the best people that I could have ever been around.
I'm sorry. Yeah, can you say
That I could have been around when
Yeah,
I was.
start over?
Yes.
Yeah, Dean Wild was what?
I think Dean Wild was one of the best people that I could have been around growing up, because he just instilled in you a fight or a drive and workability, work ethics, and all in your everyday life that carried over all through life, or has to this point. I appreciate him very much.
Well, thank you so much.
You bet.
This is
It was wonderful.
Thank
you,
y'all
sir.
for the opportunity.
Thank you very